They called us prey. Fragile. Slow. Breakable. We were the soft ones on the galactic fringe, wrapped in weak flesh and brittle bone, huddled on a wet little world that had no business surviving past its first predators. And when the hunters came, they came laughing. The XYRH stalked our colonies the way a child stomps ants, careless, arrogant, certain that fear alone would be enough to scatter us. And at first, they weren't wrong. Cities burned. Orbit cracked open like glass under their warships' claws. Their broadcast mocked us across every channel. You are meat. You are quarry. You exist to be pursued. The first clash wasn't a battle, it was slaughter. Thousands fell before they even raised a weapon. Their claws ripped through steel barricades, their heat lances carved trenches through our soldiers. And above it all, they laughed. Not cruelly. Casually. As if killing us was beneath them, a boredom breaker, sport. But here's the thing about sport, it ends when the prey refuses to play. At the ruins of Harrogate, a squad of human survivors should have broken. Their rations were gone, their comms burned out, their blood soaking the snow. The XYRH pack circled them, towering shadows under the aurora, expecting surrender. One alien leaned close, jaws dripping, and whispered in its fractured translation, "Run. Make us chase. Make it fun." The squad didn't run. They didn't beg. They just stood, rifles shaking in frozen hands, staring up at monsters that blotted out the stars. And in that silence, the silence of people too tired to scream, something shifted. The XYRH lunged, casual, certain, claws cutting the air. The humans fired. Not fast. Not accurate. But one round punched through the predator's throat, another through its eye. And when the beast collapsed, thrashing, gurgling in disbelief, the rest of the pack went still. It wasn't the kill that rattled them. It was what came after. The humans didn't cheer. They didn't weep. They reloaded. Standing in the dark with their breath fogging, every one of them bleeding from half a dozen wounds, they should have fallen over dead. Instead, they raised their rifles again, silently daring the next monster forward. The predators hesitated. That hesitation was the turning point. Because predators don't know how to process prey that doesn't break. Their instincts screamed, "This isn't right. This isn't how the hunt goes." The XYRH retreated from Harrogate that night, not far, just far enough to watch. They told themselves it was strategy, a lure to see how long these fragile bipeds could last without food, without warmth. A day at most, they reasoned. 2, if the cold was merciful. But on the third day, when their scouts crept back to the ruins, they found footprints in the snow, leading deeper into the mountains. Humans who should have been corpses were still moving, dragging their wounded with them. Bleeding. Starving. Refusing to stop. And for the first time in their long history of hunting, the XYRH whispered to one another in tones that trembled. They should be dead. The hunters followed. Of course they did. Pride demanded it. The XYRH could not allow the story to spread that prey had stood against them, that prey had made them hesitate. So they stalked into the mountains, their claws slicing through the frost-bitten trees, their heat lances humming in the dark. They mocked us as they moved. Low growls over comms, amplified so the humans could hear, "Run farther. Bleed longer. We enjoy the chase." They howled into the valleys, a sound designed to paralyze weaker creatures. But the echoes that came back were wrong. Too thin. Too sharp. Echoes carried by jagged walls and narrow passes, twisting until the hunters themselves flinched, hearing their own voices warped into something else. The first clash in the mountains came sudden. A ridge collapsed beneath a HFY vanguard, detonators planted under rock and snow. 2 hunters vanished into the gorge below, their roars snapping off mid-scream. The survivors snarled in fury. This was no desperate flight. This was an ambush. The prey had teeth. The HFY tore through the avalanche with raw power, scattering stone like sand. They found the detonator's crude, human fingerprints still smeared across the casing. Pathetic, they thought. Unsophisticated. But effective. And that word sat wrong with them. Effective. Because even as their bodies healed, even as their armor knit closed, the realization gnawed, the humans had been starving, freezing, bleeding out for days, and still they had strength to fight. Still they had planned ahead, waiting with patience that no hunted animal should possess. One hunter snarled into the night, voice dripping with scorn. You cannot win. You are flesh. We are eternity. From the darkness above, a rifle answered one shot, whisper quiet, sparking off the hunter's helm. Not a kill. Not even close. But the message was unmistakable. We're still here. The chase stretched into days. Snow turned to storms. The humans didn't vanish, they lingered. Every time the HFY expected them to collapse, they struck again. A pack beast gutted in the dark. A heat lance stolen, turned against its owner. Their wounds multiplied, their numbers dwindled, yet still they fought. The turning point came when the HFY began to dream. Not normal dreams, but flashes of human eyes in the dark, unblinking, unbroken. Their kind had hunted across 100 worlds, extinguished countless species, but never had prey followed them into their own nightmares. One night, a hunter woke shrieking, claws tearing at its chest. It swore it could feel human hands still gripping its throat, even though the battle had ended hours before. The others laughed at first. Then the laughter thinned. Because more of them began to dream. On the 7th night, when the HFY finally cornered what was left of the squad in a narrow cavern, they expected whimpers. Begging. The easy kill. Instead, they found the humans sitting in silence, rifles laid across their knees, eyes hollow but steady. Not prey waiting to die, executioners waiting their turn. The cavern pulsed with quiet. The hunters stepped forward, claws ready. And one of the humans smiled. The smile unnerved them. It was small, cracked by frostbite, lips bloodied and split. But it was wrong. Prey was not supposed to smile. The hunters advanced, filling the cavern with their armored bulk, heat lances raised. They spoke as they always did, the words practiced, ritualistic. End of the path. No more running. Kneel, and we'll make it fast. The humans didn't kneel. They didn't plead. They simply sat there in the blue shadows of the cavern, fingers tight on their rifles, as though daring death to take a step closer. One HFY lunged, impatient. Its claws flashed, scything through the air only to strike sparks. Tripwires snapped, and the cavern shuddered. Explosives ripped upward, shredding stone and fire through the roof. Ice collapsed in sheets. The hunter vanished under tons of falling rock. The others recoiled. It wasn't the blast itself that chilled them. It was the fact that the humans hadn't flinched. They had been waiting for this. The clash turned savage. XYRH claws against jagged stone, heat lances searing the walls, gunfire rattling deafeningly in the confined space. 2 more hunters fell, one to a bullet through its eye, another dragged screaming into the rubble by humans who should have been too weak to lift their arms. But humans paid dearly. Blood pooled black on the cavern floor. 2 of the survivors collapsed mid-fight, bodies giving out at last. The rest pressed on, not with the frenzy of predators, but with a kind of stubborn, grinding inevitability. That was the turning point. The XYRH had seen courage before. They had seen desperation. But this was different. This was something colder, heavier. Pain didn't break these creatures, it sharpened them. They were willing to break themselves, so long as it broke a hunter too. The survivors staggered deeper into the caverns, using the chaos to vanish into the tunnels. The hunters gave chase, but the echo of gunfire twisted into an endless labyrinth of stone. They were no longer certain if they were chasing prey, or being lured further into a trap. One hunter growled, claws dragging lines into the wall. Enough of this game. They will starve soon. They will beg soon. But its voice cracked on the last word. Beg. Because deep inside, even as it sneered, it felt a cold unease spreading through its chest. What if begging never came? What if the prey simply refused until there was nothing left to refuse with? The tunnels grew narrower. Claustrophobic. Every step echoed, every breath seemed too loud. The hunters, creatures of open plains and killing fields, began to feel caged. And worse, watched. Somewhere in the dark, a human coughed. Not a scream. Not a cry of fear. Just a rough, ragged cough echoing like a drumbeat. The sound of someone still alive. Still fighting. The hunters froze, heads snapping toward the sound. Heat lances hummed, claws flexed. The silence stretched. Then another sound came. Boots on stone. Slow. Deliberate. Closer. The XYRH raised their weapons, waiting for the rush, waiting for the last desperate charge. But no charge came. Just footsteps. Steady. Inexorable. Until the shadows themselves seemed to move. The shadows thickened in the tunnels, swallowing the blue glow of the hunter's armor. Their heat lances cast sharp beams across jagged stone, but every flicker only deepened the dark. The steady footsteps echoed louder now, bouncing from wall to wall, impossible to place. Show yourself, one hunter snarled, voice low, guttural. It meant to sound commanding. It sounded uncertain. The footsteps stopped. Then silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of something listening. Something patient. The hunters shifted, claws scraping, eyes darting through the gloom. They were predators bred on fear, they knew how to taste it, how to cultivate it in their quarry. But here, in this stone throat of a cavern, the taste in the air was wrong. Metallic. Bitter. Not human fear, but their own. A crack split the dark. A rifle shot, sharp and sudden, tore through the quiet. One hunter fell, clutching its chest, armor shattered. The beam of its lance swung wild as it collapsed, splashing the tunnel walls in light before dying out. The others roared, lashing heat into the shadows. Stone blistered. Ice steamed. The tunnel shook with their fury. But when the smoke cleared, there was nothing, just empty rock, and the sound of retreating boots. The clash surged on. The hunters pursued, driven less by hunger now than by wounded pride. They moved faster, claws gouging through the walls, snarling into the dark. Yet every turn led them deeper, narrower, tighter. One growled into comms, "They run because they're breaking." But another whispered back, "Or they run because they're leading." That whisper cut deeper than any bullet. The turning point came when they found the bodies. Two humans, motionless on the cavern floor, blood frozen black across their uniforms. Dead at last. Easy kills. The hunters circled, relief surging in their chest plates. Proof. Proof the nightmare ended here. Until one of the corpses moved. Eyes opened, glassy but defiant. A cracked smile twisted across a frostburned face. The dead human yanked a pin with shaking fingers. Grenade. The blast gutted the tunnel, collapsing stone and flame. Two hunters were crushed in the collapse, screaming as they were swallowed by the earth. The survivors clawed free, scorched and battered, fury howling through their throats. But even as they rose from the rubble, their roars rang hollow. Because prey did not die like this. Prey did not smile while it burned. Prey did not drag killers into the grave with them. And for the first time, the hunters understood, this was not prey at all. They regrouped, limping through the ruin, fewer now, shaken. One muttered, "We should withdraw. Regain strength. End this properly." Another bared its fangs, desperate for certainty. They are broken. They must be broken. But the cavern answered with something else. Footsteps. Again. Slow. Heavy. Echoing from the black. The humans should have been gone. Buried. Dead 100 times over. Yet in the silence, they walked still. Closer. The footsteps wouldn't stop. They came and went, vanishing into cracks, reappearing behind them, always steady, always deliberate. The hunters swore the sound echoed inside their skulls, like a second heartbeat. One lashed out, slamming claws through a wall of stone. Phantoms, it growled, chest heaving. They are shadows and tricks. But shadows don't bleed you. Tricks don't leave bodies. And everywhere the hunters turned, they found the signs, blood smeared across the stone, casings scattered in the dust, the faint smell of gunpowder clinging to the tunnels like smoke. The clash came sudden. Bullets snapped from above, raining from cracks in the ceiling. The hunters wheeled, firing upward, beams scorching holes through the rock. One human dropped, broken by the blast, but the others didn't hesitate. They didn't mourn. They fired again, until another hunter fell, clawing at its throat where a round had punched deep. The survivors snarled, rage eating through their fear. They surged forward, tearing through stone, chasing the flicker of human shadows retreating deeper. But the chase felt wrong. Their claws dripped, their lances hummed, yet every strike seemed to miss something vital. The humans didn't fight for victory. They fought for attrition. Every exchange left the hunters bleeding a little more, their armor chipped, their certainty frayed. One growled in disbelief as it tore a rifle from human hands, snapping the weapon in half. You cannot win. You cannot endure forever. The human, lips blue with cold, just coughed blood into its face and whispered, "Watch me." The words landed heavier than any blade. The turning point came hours later, when the hunters paused to regroup in a hollow chamber. They counted their wounded, their dwindling ammunition, their trembling claws. None would admit the truth out loud, but all of them felt it. They were tired. Not physically, their bodies could endure far more. It was deeper than that. A fatigue of the mind. Predators weren't supposed to tire. They were supposed to kill, feast, and move on. Yet these humans had forced them into something alien, an endurance trial. A game of patience, suffering, and will. And the longer it went on, the more the hunters realized they were not the ones suited for it. One by one, they began to hear things. Not footsteps this time. Voices. Human voices in the dark, too far away to be real, too close to ignore. Some begged. Some laughed. Some whispered in tones so soft they might have been imagined. The hunters snapped at each other, claws drawn, accusing one another of weakness. But when they turned, they saw it, a mark scrawled on the cavern wall. A handprint in blood, fingers dragging downward. Fresh. Still wet. The humans were leaving messages now. They weren't running blindly. They were taunting. The chamber seemed smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. The hunters tightened into a circle, weapons raised, waiting for the inevitable strike. And then they heard it. Not footsteps. Not voices. Breathing. Steady. Human. Right behind them. The breathing froze them. Low, steady, impossible. They wheeled as one, heat lances blazing, claws tearing the air. The chamber exploded with firelight and smoke. Stone split. Dust poured down. But when the echoes faded, there was nothing. Just the shadows. Just silence. Predators weren't supposed to doubt their senses. Doubt was for prey. Yet their eyes darted in every direction, and their throats rumbled with unease. One hissed, "They are ghosts." Another snarled back, "They are flesh. They must be." But its voice cracked, betraying its own disbelief. The clash came sudden. Gunfire flared from a side tunnel, muzzle flashes like lightning. Bullets cut into their ranks, staggering one, dropping another to its knees. They returned fire in a frenzy, beams melting stone, filling the cavern with acrid steam. But by the time they advanced, the shooters were gone, melted into the tunnels. They found only blood trails, winding deeper, never-ending. That was the human's weapon now. Not strength. Not numbers. Not even their rifles. It was the erosion of certainty. The slow grind of persistence. The hunters bled, not only from wounds, but from something deeper, the collapse of belief in their own supremacy. They stopped speaking as much. Where once they mocked, now their words came clipped, tense. They muttered of traps, of phantoms, of prey that should have died days ago. And when one finally dared to say, "What if they cannot die?" the others turned on it, snarling, as though the words themselves were poison. The turning point came with a discovery. Deep in a side cavern, half hidden under stone, they found a body. Human. Frozen stiff, face gray, eyes glazed. At first relief washed through them. Proof of mortality. proof this nightmare had an end. But as they stepped closer, they saw the hands. The fingers had carved lines into the stone around them. Not random scratches, marks. Tallies. Hundreds of them, etched until nails had torn and flesh had worn down to bone. The hunters recoiled. This one had died clawing time itself into the walls, refusing to vanish without leaving evidence behind. The tally marks ended only when the body could no longer move. And in that frozen silence, the hunters understood, these creatures did not measure survival by days, or by battles. They measured it by refusal. By how long they could spite death before it finally claimed them. A sound broke the stillness. A laugh. Not mocking, not triumphant. Just a ragged, human laugh echoing through the stone. It carried no fear. No weakness. The hunters spun, searching the dark. Their claws shook. The laugh cut off. Then the breathing returned. Louder this time. Closer. One hunter fired blindly, beam slicing the dark. Another backed into the wall, chest plates rattling with each breath. And then, in the dust, eyes opened. Human eyes. Cold. Sunken. Watching. The hunters froze. Because prey should not look at predators like that. The eyes burned in the dark, unblinking. The hunters surged forward with a roar, desperate to shatter the illusion, to tear apart the fragile body that dared to look at them without fear. Claws slashed, lances fired, the cavern thundered with violence. Stone collapsed, smoke swirled. When the haze cleared, the eyes were gone. Only empty tunnels remained. That was when the retreat began, though none of them spoke the word aloud. Their formation tightened, their pace slowed. Every step forward felt like stepping deeper into a snare. They no longer hunted. They crept. The clash came sharp and brutal. Gunfire erupted from a choke point, bullets ricocheting off their armor. One hunter fell, jaw shattered by a lucky shot. Another stumbled into a tripwire, explosives detonated, collapsing the roof, burying it alive. The survivors clawed free, howling, but the tunnel behind them was sealed. There was no way back. They pressed forward, deeper still, herded by prey. The air grew colder. Frost laced the walls. Their breath steamed. Every sound seemed amplified, the crunch of stone beneath their claws, the hiss of their own growls. They began to hear things that weren't there, whispers of human voices, snatches of words in a language they didn't understand. One hunter jerked suddenly, firing down a side passage. The blast tore through stone, leaving only silence. The others glared, but none mocked. Because each of them had thought they saw something too. The turning point came when they found the fire. Deep in a hollow, a small flame guttered, feeding on scraps of wood and torn fabric. Around it lay human gear, helmets, ration packs, bloody bandages. Fresh. Hours old at most. The hunters circled it, claws twitching. The prey had sat here, warming themselves, feeding, bleeding. They had left this fire burning on purpose. A message. One hunter growled, low. They know we follow. Another answered, almost whispering. They want us to. For a moment, silence fell heavier than the stone around them. Because no one said what they were all thinking, predators were being lured. Hunted. Then came the sound. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something worse. Knocking. 3 sharp knocks on the stone. Close. Rhythmic. The hunters spun. The knocks came again, behind them now. Then to the side. Then from above. Echoing through the tunnels, surrounding them. The rhythm sped up, until it sounded like the beating of a heart. They fired in every direction, beams slicing walls, claws shredding stone. The knocks only grew louder, closer, faster. And then it stopped. Total silence. One hunter whispered, "Where are they?" The answer came in gunfire. A storm of bullets ripped from the shadows, tearing into the pack. One collapsed instantly, throat obliterated. Another staggered, shrieking, as rounds tore through its chest plate. The survivors scrambled, firing blind, their roars breaking into panic. And through the smoke, shapes emerged, human shapes, ragged and bloodied, but standing. Moving forward. Refusing to die. The shapes advanced through the smoke, half dead, half shadow, but moving with the inevitability of executioners. The hunters roared to hold their ground, but the sound cracked in their throats. This was wrong. Prey did not advance. Prey fled. Prey begged. Yet here were creatures bloodied and burned, dragging themselves forward as though pain itself was their weapon. The clash was chaos. Gunfire lit the chamber, muzzle flashes like lightning. A hunter lunged, cleaving a human in two, but another stepped into the gap, firing point-blank into its jaw. Another hunter was swarmed, weak, starving hands clawing its armor open, stabbing through its wounds. The XYRH thrashed, ripped them apart, but not before they dragged it down with them. The survivors of both sides bled into the stone. But the humans kept moving. Always forward. The hunters' formation shattered. No longer a line of predators pressing prey, they scattered into the tunnels, retreating one by one, instincts tearing at their discipline. One bellowed over comms, desperate, regroup. Hold. But the others were already fleeing, stumbling through narrow passages, dragging their wounded, leaving the dead behind. The turning point was not a kill. It was a silence. When the last shots faded, the hunters paused, panting in the dark, their armor hissing with damage. And then they realized, the humans had not pursued. No footsteps. No voices. Just the echo of their own frantic retreat. That silence was worse than any attack. Because it meant the humans didn't have to chase. They could wait. Wait for hunger, for cold, for fear. And the hunters, for the first time in their long history, felt what it was to be the quarry. They argued in whispers. We leave now. Break the tunnels. Seal them. Another hissed back, no. If we run, their defiance spreads. Every world will hear. We end it here. But their words rang hollow. None of them believed victory was certain anymore. They had lost too many, spent too much. And still the prey rose from the ground. Still the prey bled and walked. The paranoia deepened. Every drip of water became a footstep. Every gust of air became a laugh. Their claws twitched at shadows, lances fired at echoes. They moved like cornered beasts, jerking at phantoms only they could see. Then came the proof. They stumbled upon another cavern, walls marked with blood. Not tallies this time, words. Human words scrawled in their own language, over and over, carved into the stone with nails and knives. We do not stop. We do not die. We do not run. The hunters stared, chest plates heaving. Their claws scraped against the marks, as though erasing them might erase the truth. But behind them, deep in the tunnel, footsteps started again. Slow. Steady. Closer. The hunters broke. Pride, training, ritual, none of it mattered. They turned and ran, fleeing into the dark, their roars collapsing into ragged breaths. And the sound followed. The tunnels swallowed them whole. Claws scraped stone, armor clanged against narrow walls, their breath rasped like engines overheating. They were no longer advancing, no longer even retreating in order, they were fleeing, blind, their discipline shredded. Predators were not supposed to feel this way. Predators did not stumble. Predators did not choke on panic. Yet their vision blurred, their senses twisted, every sound sharpening into a knife against their nerves. And always, the footsteps. Not fast. Not frantic. Slow. Deliberate. Pacing them. Stalking them. One hunter snapped, whirling with a snarl, blasting heat into the dark. The tunnel scorched, stone melted, but no target stood there. Only the endless echo of boots, patient and steady. The clash came in fragments now. A bullet from above clipped one hunter's shoulder, spinning it into the wall. Another stumbled into barbed wire strung across a choke point, primitive, but enough to drag it down. The others pulled it free, but its armor was shredded, its blood leaking into the ice. They kept moving, but slower now, dragging their wounded. Every step cost them. Every corner revealed nothing but more tunnels, more darkness, more waiting silence. One muttered, half-choked, "This is impossible. They are broken things. They cannot last this long." Another rasped, "Yet they do." That exchange hung heavier than any blow. The turning point came when they reached a cavern lit faintly by cracks in the surface. Snow filtered through, pale light touching the walls. For a moment, they felt relief and exit, a way back to open ground. Then they saw the shapes. Humans. Dozens of them. Ragged, frostbitten, ice-hollow, standing in the snowlight like phantoms. Too many. More than the hunters had counted. Some were wounded beyond reason, legs bound with splints, faces masked with blood. Yet they stood. Rifles raised. Silent. The hunters froze. Because this was not prey. This was an army of the dead refusing to lie down. One hunter roared, trying to break the moment, trying to believe its own defiance. "You are nothing. You are carrion. You cannot kill us all." And from the human line came the answer. A single voice, cracked but steady, "We don't need to." Gunfire erupted, ripping the cavern apart. Hunters dropped one after another, riddled with rounds, torn by shrapnel. They charged, claws cleaving, lances blazing, but every step forward was swallowed by fire and blood. The survivors fell back, stumbling into the tunnels once more, dragging their dead, leaving pieces of themselves behind. And the worst part was not the wounds. Not the losses. It was the silence that followed them. Because the humans did not chase. They didn't need to. They simply watched the mighty hunters flee, and that sight alone was enough to unmake them. For the first time in their long history, the predators of the XYRH fled from prey. But even as they ran, they knew the footsteps would follow. The snowstorm howled above the surface, blinding white fury sweeping the ice plains. The surviving hunters clawed their way out of the tunnels, armor scorched, bodies mangled, spirits cracked. They had come here as predators, supreme, unquestioned masters of the kill. Now they emerged as fugitives, staggering, bleeding, shivering in air that cut like razors. They regrouped in a half-circle, scanning the horizon with fractured senses. Only a handful remained. Their leader, chest plate shattered, hissed through broken mandibles. "We return to the vessel. We leave this cursed rock. We erase it from record." The others nodded weakly. Flight was all they had left. They trudged toward the black silhouette of their ship, looming in the distance through the storm. Every step felt like dragging chains. Every heartbeat hammered with the echo of those damned footsteps, though none sounded here on the open plains. The silence was worse than pursuit. When they reached the ship, something was wrong. The hatch gaped open, interior lights flickering erratic. The scent hit them first: oil, smoke, blood. They entered cautiously, weapons raised. Inside, the vessel was torn apart. Panels ripped down, systems gutted, crew scattered across the decks in pieces. Claw marks? No. Explosives. Fire. Gunfire. Human work. But how? These survivors had no ships, no tools, no hope. Yet here was proof: while the hunters fled underground, the prey had climbed up into the sky. They had taken the fight straight into the predator's den. The clash came swift and merciless. Shadows moved in the wreckage, ragged figures rising from hiding places. Humans. Frostbitten, limping, bleeding, but grinning through the carnage they had wrought. Gunfire tore the lead hunter's chest apart before it could roar. Another was brought down with an axe to the throat. The survivors fought back, snarling, raking with claws, cutting down humans in sprays of gore, but for every one they killed, 3 more seemed to rise. The turning point came with a single sight: a human dragging itself forward with only one arm, legs mangled, face barely recognizable beneath blood and frost. It should have been dead hours ago. Yet it crawled through fire, clutching a grenade pin between its teeth, eyes locked on the nearest hunter. The explosion took 2 of them at once. The last of the hunters tried to run, stumbling up the corridor toward the storm outside. It burst through the hatch into blinding snow, only to stop dead. Because waiting there, scattered across the white plain, were more figures. Dozens. Hundreds. Survivors who should not exist. Standing, limping, crawling, but all moving forward. No words. No war cry. Only that same unbearable silence. The hunter dropped its weapon. Its legs refused to move. For the first time in all its life, it understood absolute terror. The humans did not rush. They advanced slowly, deliberately, the way hunters stalk prey. And in that frozen moment, the galaxy's apex predator understood the truth. It was no longer the hunter. It was the prey. If this story gripped you, subscribe and stay with us, because in the next tale, humanity won't just survive, we'll show the galaxy why we were never prey to begin with.